U kunt gaan zitten. Dit is een eerste onderdeel van deze universiteit en dat is namelijk stand while you see the cortège coming in. Dat is onderdeel van onze nieuwe leerlessen. Dames en heren, mijn lezing zal in het Engels zijn, omdat deze universiteit ook het Engels en het Nederlands gebruikt in haar onderwijs en haar onderzoek. Your Excellencies, Minister of Education, Culture and Science, Jet Bussemaker, Mayor of the City of Maastricht, Anne-Marie Pentestrake, colleagues, Rectores Magnifici, dear soon-to-be colleagues, Rectores Magnifici Emeriti, dear members of the Supervisory Board, dear soon-to-be ex-colleagues of the Executive Board, dear Rianne, dear students, staff and friends, ladies and gentlemen. This is the fifth and last time I stand here on this pulpit in the Sint Janskerk. The first time was in January 1990 when I was asked at a rather young age of 39 to give the university's 14th Dies Natalis lecture of what was then called the Rijksuniversiteit Limburg, RL. The title of my talk was "The Future Isn't What It Used to Be," a title which seemed particularly appropriate in those first days of the 90s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the expectations of what this radical change might bring about in Europe. The future suddenly didn't appear anymore to what it had been just 1 year before. Now, 26 years later, as retiring Rector Magnificus of Maastricht University, I'm tempted to give you an alternative, radically different perspective on the future. More in the tradition of Robert Nathan, the American writer who published in 1956 a satirical essay reporting the far distant future view of the contemporary US, formed from the surviving fragmentary remnants of a people who refer to themselves as the us, the US, the us. Following Robert Nathan, my future story begins also at the far distant future time when a team of foreign social scientists, in Robert Nathan's case, Kenyan archaeologists who spoke English properly, had discovered the ruins of a civilization lost for more than 6,000 years. Nathan had the advantage of writing in the 50s, before the existence of digital archives, leaving him free to fully exploit his creativity and playful satire in imagining how the archaeologists' variant interpretations of what they found in the remains of what they called Pound Laundry. Pound Laundry was the place name they had reconstructed, painstakingly derived from their translations of the letters washing and ton, that had been inscribed on the fragments of stone monuments they found, and despite the absence of supporting evidence that anything had been washed in this place, they gave it the name Pound Laundry. In my story, the focus of future interest falls upon the meaning or meanings that are to be given to peculiar academic relics that have been unearthed at Maastricht. I'm talking here about 5,967. A city of Maastricht still known in this far distant future among scholars of ancient political institutions for its association with the treaty too far. My discussion of these discoveries will be confined, though, to the focus on the relics of the word that the inhabitants used in connection with particular buildings that were scattered throughout the city's core and in referring to participants in certain public rituals and the ceremonial garb displayed on such occasions. Why and how had these strange academics come to refer to themselves in that hesitant way? The Did they suffer from some commonly shared language disorder, or was it the interjection into their spoken communications as a device to gain time because one wasn't sure what one should try to communicate to others, or simply to mask that at the moment they had nothing at all in mind? According to collected digital archives, thank God for digital humanities, these academics also claimed that they were leading in learning. So in all likelihood, the name referred to the verbal technique developed in their communications with students, Much valued because it gave both speaker and listener more time to reflect upon what had been uttered and what could be said next, thinking and learning while speaking. And even more surprisingly, close nearby, across the River Maas in West Limburg, the report from the future relates the discovery of another ancient academic place occupied by scientists who called themselves the UH. I hope that my colleague Luc Soete doesn't mind. According to one well-known local language scholar at the time, Leonie Kornips, the difference between the and the could signify nothing more than some differences in the pronunciation of the regional dialect commonly used during that epoch, because subsequent descendants of Limburgs have a continuing tendency to take a lot of time before actually pronouncing something. I would claim, however, that the couplets should be taken to be further historical proof that those two academic communities had developed a strikingly clever way of communication amongst themselves, playing for more time in discussing academic arguments while confusing the others, and with students getting so bored by lectures continuously enhanced with that they had organized education through tutorless learning groups, what was called at the time PBL. Why did this clever community ultimately disappear? They seem to have invented the self-organization of education rather well. Their learning methods appeared well suited for application in many other domains, including politics. Could it be that the eventual downfall of this society was the consequence of this effective technique of academic communication being subverted by strategic forms of linguistic behavior? In the many digital and handwritten documents and fragmentary memos that I have compiled in a small green book that I always carry here with me, there are copious pointers to the conclusion that the meaning of or changed over time from a clever expression of learning while speaking into the challenge, and I quote, "Something is urgently wrong, but rather than having me simply tell you what it is, it will be better for you to figure it out yourself in the amount of time it will take me to complete this unhelpfully sarcastic remark." Let me give you an illustrative example of how scientists might have communicated before using the proper learning as you speak protocol in an urgent situation. And of course, the names I will be using are purely fictional. Harm, and I quote, "Martin, watch out for that large pothole you seem to be unknowingly driving into." Martin, avoiding the pothole, "Thank you for your timely and straightforward warning. I appreciate you using the first sentence after you were alerted to this danger to tell me about this pothole instead of uttering a one-worded useless phrase." And now the same situation, once strategic behavior had become the norm in this community. We find Harm sarcastically describing the identical situation. Martin, what? Car drives into the pothole. Harm, whoa, good job. I have lots of different examples which I will not cite here. But as you might have presumed from this somewhat extensive elaboration, future studies have been a topic about which I have loved to write and talk about at various occasions in my 30 years here in Maastricht. Technology forecasting was indeed a topic popular in the UK and the US where I worked before coming to Maastricht. The US Congress had even set up in the late 70s a now defunct organization, the Office of Technology Assessment, which initiated some of the most detailed and sophisticated analysis of future technological trends. Of course, and as my colleague Rianne de Wilde has been keen to point out, many of those future studies often appear to have missed completely developments as they actually took place. Still, foresight studies have become gradually integrated in policy making with the growing popularity of so-called ex-ante impact assessment in order to predict the likely impact of funding this or that research field. If only one would apply such future-oriented ex-ante impact assessments to politics and election debates. Here to illustrate the potential scope is a suggestion for Britain's Prime Minister, following her comment that Brexit remains Brexit. In 2019, when the Brexit negotiations will have been concluded in the most optimistic scenario, The ranks of the British voting population will have expanded by the addition of 2 million citizens who will then have reached the age of 18 and suffered the loss of 1.5 million due to the deaths of older citizens. Given that the vote of youngsters was 75% for Remain, while 60% of those aged 65 plus voted to leave, it can be estimated that in 2019 the pro-EU camp will have gained 1 million adherents, while size of the pro-Brexit camp will be 350,000 smaller. In short, an outcome which will be the reverse of the results of the balloting held last June. Demographic trends remain by far the best forecasting tool, and that is what led me some years ago to argue for broadening the electoral vote to all citizens, giving proxy votes to parents for their children. A proposal discussed already a decade ago by Philippe van Parijs, who is scheduled to speak later. In many ways, the Brexit referendum, with its striking generational divide in opinions about the desirability of leaving rather than remaining in the European Union, offers a striking illustration of the potential power of broadening democratic representation to give voice to the future generations who will inherit a world transformed by today's choices. That is what brought me to the title of this farewell lecture, "The Present Isn't What It Used to Be." Reflecting over the experience of the past 4 years, it is difficult not to be struck by the speed and all-encompassing nature of the challenges that within only the past couple of years have emerged to confront us. It seems as if the temporal course of development is no longer characterized by steady linear change and has instead become exponential in pace and sometimes chaotic in its directions. I can offer a couple of illustrations that lend greater concreteness to the impression that change has been so abrupt that our sense of the present is no longer what it used to be. May I first, for instance, welcome you to my own international economics discipline field, where in the world of monetary theory and monetary policy, for sure, the prevailing present isn't what it used to be. As my colleague Tom van Veen has argued on various occasions, helicopter money, the idea of money being dropped from the sky, as Lambic did in the Suske en Wiske album De Wilde Weldoener, suddenly has become a hot topic in current debates about how to tackle the current low growth and low inflation trap in which most developed countries find themselves stuck. Japan is actually on the verge of introducing such a policy, which formerly existed only in the realm of thought experiments devised for macroeconomists by Milton Friedman. Europe might be next, because the European Central Bank, responsible for monetary policy in the Eurozone area, is running out of other anti-deflation options. Having reduced its so-called ECB refinancing or minimum bid rate interest rate to 0% and buying up government bonds and other securities and assets on a massive scale in trying to reignite the European growth machine, time is clearly not on its side. Swapping bonds and other assets for cash from the European Central Bank doesn't seem, at least up to now, to have made any significant impact, not in the least because the shift in regulations following the financial crisis in 2008 has required banks to hold substantially more capital on their balance sheet, in effect, putting today less money in the economy than they ever did in the past. At the same time, such quantitative easing, or in more popular terms, printing money, policy causes significant instabilities on financial markets. Dutch pensioners and pension funds alike have grown nervous because interest rates on their savings and investments no longer provide sufficient guarantees for long-term income. And the financial sector itself is seeing its own profitable activities undermined by very low interest rates and equity yields resulting from the use of these so-called quantitative easing techniques. The alternative, helicopter money policy, for instance through the European Central Bank making perpetual loans to households at zero interest rates, puts money directly in the hands of people. As has been pointed out by many macroeconomists, this form of democratic helicopter money, and that's why they don't use the term drone money, is also a monetary policy instrument using similar quantitative easing techniques, but may also be viewed as the equivalent of a tax rebate policy. However, because it is institutionally distinct from fiscal policy, it would offer the European Central Bank a more effective policy tool while maintaining the institutional separation between fiscal and monetary authorities, dispensing with the need for any coordination between the two or the subordination of one to the other. In short, in the new upside-down policy world of applied helicopter money, all the advantages of the European Central Bank decision-making and independence are retained at the stroke and made perfectly legal in the Eurozone area. Its implementation would directly address the current deflationary situation created by the Maastricht Treaty, having led to a neutering of effective fiscal policy within the Eurozone. My second example of a sphere of public policy choices in which the present isn't what it used to be is the role of education in enhancing social mobility. There was a time when we all believed that education was essential for intergenerational mobility. Here too, recent evidence suggests that children of non-college graduates are about as unlikely to attend college in a country such as Denmark, the country believed to be the most advanced in social mobility, as in the US. Ongoing research at this university, carried out by Lex Borghans, Rontiers and Trudy Schils within the framework of the Educatieve Agenda Limburg, confirms this tendency for the Netherlands, and in particular for Limburg, characterized by a much larger proportion of native, low-skilled parents than elsewhere in the country. However, at the same time, the large investments made in public education in countries such as Denmark do pay off in developing higher cognitive skills among low-income children, as international math and reading scores illustrate, with the poorest quartiles in Denmark or in the Netherlands far outperforming their counterparts in the US. In short, equality of opportunity appears, surprisingly in the current social media Wikipedia world, to be a fantasy. It does not exist in the US, it does not exist in Denmark, in the Netherlands, in Limburg, and it probably doesn't exist anywhere. In other words, parents matter. That's for the sobering side of the evidence. On the more positive side, the fact that, as in Denmark, enrollment in daycare, in preschool, and other early education investments have a high payoff in the development of cognitive skills for low-income children points to a rather straightforward policy answer to the present problem of, for instance, language deficiencies of children from immigrants and families of foreign origin, certainly when they remain socially clustered within their own communities. It remains for me, as a foreign observer, one of the most striking inconsistencies of Dutch intergenerational transfer policies. Public investment in free schooling only from the age of 4 onwards creates a situation in which only parents with a high income are able to afford to pay for daycare, reinforcing, so to say, inequality at the start of the life cycle, and the universal public pension WHO scheme on top of semi-private pension funds, reinforcing inequality in the last phase. Why not cut the WHO for those pensioners with semi-private pensions above a certain level and use those monies to subsidize free daycare? Is it because, as in the Brexit case, politicians fear the vote of pensioners? It appears that it is time to escape the present by joining Philippe van Parijs' search for intergenerational justice and implementing the idea of giving parents proxy votes to cast in the interest of their children's collective futures. I've held back a third and concluding problem area in which neither the past nor the present is what it used to be. The European Union project, of course. To put things into perspective, when I started my term as Rector Magnificus in 2012, the European Commission received the Nobel Peace Prize. 4 years later, a majority of British voters chooses to exit Europe. I will not elaborate too much on this topic, as Philippe van Parijs is waiting on deck to give his views on Europe's destiny. Yet, having been present here in Maastricht at the time of the Eurotop, it's obviously striking to me how suddenly the discussion of Europe's future shifted abruptly from analytical, albeit often hotly debated, economic arguments to political, often fact-free populist claims. Hopefully, the activities jointly organized with the provincial authorities surrounding the 25th anniversary of the Eurotop in December of this year, and that of the signing of the Maastricht Treaty in February next year, will bring us back to more analytical and evidence-based arguments than Europe's citizens have been offered in the media. But ladies and gentlemen, it is time to conclude by proceeding to the biggest change taking place here and now, just after Philippe van Parijs' talk. My passing off this academic relic here, the Rector Magnificus chain, to my successor, Professor Dr. Rianne Letschert, who in putting it on will become the 10th Rector Magnificus and will set me free of the honors burden. R.M. Letschert. As the initials of your name indicate, you were born to become Rector Magnificus. Yet, and as I take this last opportunity to peer more closely at what is written on this chain of academic authority, I can make out, oh no, not UM, but R.L. Rianne Letschert. In short, you were born to become Rector Magnificus of this university. Ik heb gezegd. As you have been waiting so long, we have now changed a little bit the program. We will have first the musical intermezzo. I invite you to listen to Tuur Florison and Didier Laloy, two Belgians, who will play for you Rue Saint-Géry and Tragédie Lego. Tuur. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce our next speaker, Philippe van Parijs. If you can, while you mount, I will, on the pulpit there, I can just say a couple of things about introducing and why Philippe is here. I've known Philippe since my young age, because we were born in the same, well, not born, but lived in the same city in Brussels, in Sint Janskerk. I see some of my brothers there, the famous Sint Janskerk. And we both went to the same school, and in those days, the school were mixed still, Dutch and French together. There were not yet walls in the schools, so Philippe was French-speaking, I was Dutch-speaking. Philippe, after his studies at Heideggard College in Ganshoorn, went to Leuven in French. Still then, French studies were happening in Leuven. And I went to Ghent. Philippe afterwards went to Oxford to do his PhD. I went to Sussex to do my PhD. Philippe came back to Brussels to live in Schaerbeek and went back at the Université Catholique de Louvain, and I came back to Maastricht. And he made a brilliant career going to Harvard, Oxford, etc. But he will talk about all this, so I'm delighted that my school friend of those days is here with me on this day, and I'm delighted to listen to Philippe here on Europe's Destiny. Philippe, you have the floor.
Europe's destiny. I'm meant to speak about Europe's destiny. In the middle of all these crises, financial crisis, Euro crisis, refugee crisis, Greek crisis, Turkish crisis, Ukrainian crisis, Brexit crisis, and in Maastricht, of all places, and in a church, and in 20 minutes. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. And I try to live up to one expectation in this sort of events, which is that by the end of this ceremony, you want to be jolly rather than gloomy. It won't be easy, but I'll try. I'll try with 2 recommendations and then 1 argument. Recommendation 1, humor. Humor. If you want to be jolly about the future of Europe, you must make room for humor. The retiring rector showed the example, and we shall soon see whether his successor will follow it. Humor is essential to the health, to the sanity of communities, as it is to the health of marriages. But let us be careful, because for humor to be healthy, it needs to satisfy some conditions. Humor can be unhealthy, it can be damaging, it can be disastrous if it is humiliating, if it is belittling, if it is hurtful. And avoiding this has become trickier than before in today's Europe. The safest form of humor, you know it all, is humor about yourself. For example, if you are Dutch, it's better to make jokes about the Dutch rather than about the Belgians. Unless you feel so similar to Belgians that making fun about Belgians is really like making fun about the Dutch. That will be fine. If you then really want to make fun about people you feel are different from yourselves, then do it about the powerful, not about the vulnerable, not about the weak. For example, we have in our institution a nice habit which is called the revue in my university. I'm sure you have something similar in at least some of your universities, which is a moment every year where the students make fun of the professors. They imitate them, and by imitating them, they make them laughable, which often is not that difficult. And this habit, I think this institution, is far better than the opposite. It wouldn't be right for us professors to have a show every year making fun of our students. And I found this institution of the review particularly good because Not only is it the relatively weak who make fun of the relatively powerful, namely their professors, but in addition, basically, our students are like us. By making fun of us, they make fun of themselves because they're also arrogant like us. They also think they are clever. They also think they know lots of things. They also think they are superior to the people who don't go to university. So that's fine. That's a healthy sort of humor when you make fun of yourself or you make fun of the more powerful. But things today have become more difficult. It's more difficult to understand what may be felt, what may be experienced as humiliating by other people, as hurtful as the experience of the Danish cartoons and then of Charlie Hebdo have taught us, or if we hadn't learned it before. And it's important in today's Europe, in today's hyper-diverse Europe, increasingly hyper-diverse Europe, in the increasingly hyper-connected Europe, it's increasingly important to be culturally sensitive, and as regards humor, it's important to keep an important place for humor, but it's also important to use it in a way that's more sensitive than ever to these cultural diversities and to the realizations that things may be experienced differently by people different from ourselves. Therefore, it will be an important part of a jolly future, of a happy future for Europe, that we should constantly refrain from doing a number of things, from drawing, from writing, from saying things which our Constitution rightly entitles us, rightly gives us the right to say. Second recommendation, in order to be jolly about Europe's destiny, pessimism. Pessimism. Be pessimistic for the short term. For example, if you think that Brexit, if and when it happens, will be a calamity, then not only predict, but convince yourself that it will happen. And then either it does happen, and then you'll have the mediocre satisfaction of having been proven right, or it does not happen, and you are blessed with a wonderful surprise. Try it, starting maybe with the weather. And you'll probably experience what I experienced, which is that since I adopted this attitude, my life has been an endless alternation of confirmations and good surprises. That's why I can look so jolly today, despite a number of things happening. These were the two recommendations. But now let's get serious. My short-term pessimism, not least about Europe, can only work well, can only do its job, because it operates against a background of long-term optimism. And if you are to share this long-term optimism about Europe, about more specifically the European Union, then you'll need a bit more than a short recommendation. You will need an argument. Here, there is time only for a very short sketch of this argument. Its core consists in a dual claim. Part one, civilization is good for European integration. Part two, European integration is good for civilization. Two claims against a background, which is that we human beings tend to become more and more civilized, and that being civilized, being more civilized, is a good thing. In order to convey briefly what lies behind this argument, let me piggyback on two approaches that may be familiar to at least some of you. Approach number one, Steven Pinker's history of violence. I'm sure some of you have read his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, and I'll summarize in an extremely succinct way, and then draw from it what I need for my argument. Steven Pinker, so professor of psychology at Harvard, asked one question in his book, which is, why is there so little violence in today's world? So little, so little. Yes, very, very little in relative terms, relative to the human population. The probability of being killed voluntarily by another human being today is massively smaller, is tiny compared to what it used to be in prehistory or in the Middle Ages. Just to help you, I'm not going to give you empirical evidence now, but perhaps to give you a glimpse of why this is plausible, despite being at first sight very implausible. Think back about Europe at the time at which the population of Europe, of the whole of Europe, was about some point in the Middle Ages, was about the same as the population of London or of Paris today. Well, in that Europe, you had all these fortresses, all these fortifications, all these armies, all these gallows, all these mercenaries fighting with each other, trying to get all these brigands, private and collective violence. This was the fate of the situation then. Since then, the rate of violence, the rate of homicide, has fallen dramatically. And Pinker gives all sorts of evidence in order to substantiate that counterintuitive claim. And he asks then, why? Why has it happened? Why this fall in violence? Because of two processes. First one is what he called pacification. That is, the brutal force of a top ruler that keeps the local warlords and all sorts of criminals under control. So top-down violence that reduces massively the overall level of violence. This may be Charlemagne, it may be the Tsar, it may be Gaddafi, it may be Saddam Hussein. Top-down violence, but that reduces massively the total level of violence. That's the first process. And the second process, which as it proceeds makes the first one less necessary, is what he calls, following Norbert Elias, civilization. What is civilization? It is the development, the nurturing by culture of what he calls the two better angels of our nature, an expression from Abraham Lincoln, two innate dispositions that are more or less developed according to the culture, and that became more and more developed in Western civilization, but not only in Western civilizations. What are they? One is self-control, which is in part, not entirely, which is in part the replacement of the pursuit of self-interest through commercial relations, through market relations, the substitution of that pursuit of self-interest for passion. It's the replacement of passion by this self-interest and the self-control that goes with it. That's one. And the other one is the development of empathy, being able to put oneself in other people's shoes, in other people's minds, in other people's hearts. Not going into the reason, the causes of this development, but this happened gradually. And the more civilization you have, the less you need the top-down pacification. Now, what is the connection with the European Union? Well, not too much spelling out is needed in order to connect what I just said, borrowing from Pinker, to the dual claim with which I started my argument. Much civilization, so one part of the claim, much civilization must have happened in the shadow of pacification for a voluntary union, a non-hegemonic empire to emerge, one European Union whose components joined by application rather than conquest. Civilization, as defined by Pinker, is part of what made it possible. But conversely, and that's even more important for my purpose, the very operation of the European Union, starting with market integration, the substitution of commercial interaction for national passions, le doux commerce, as Montesquieu called it, and then increasingly also through all other forms of extra economic integration and the empathy it facilitates. Well, the operation of the European Union makes it possible to enlarge the scale at which the civilizing process, in this sense, pursues its journey, with ever wider circles, somewhat more governed by the better angels of our nature. Self-control rather than destructive passions, empathy rather than self-serving egocentrism. This was quick about Pinker and the connection, probably too quick to convince you, but let me quickly turn to the second approach. Second approach is the theory of deliberative democracy as captured in particular by a formula which I like particularly, coined by Jon Elster, a professor, a philosopher who teaches at the Collège de France and at Columbia University. What is, he asked, what is at the core of a democracy that functions well? The civilizing force of hypocrisy. Democracy that functions well must have as at its core the civilizing force of hypocrisy. But what does that mean? Well, it means that whatever politicians' deep motives, people who are in power and have to defend their policies, people who want to be elected and have to defend what they propose, are driven, are forced to argue that what they are doing or what they propose doing are not there to serve their own personal interest. They don't say, vote for me because it's in my interest. They don't say, vote for me because it's in the interest of the people who paid for my campaign. They don't say, vote for me because it's good for the rich in our country. No, they all say, left and right, they all say, vote for me because, vote for my policies, approve my policies in Parliament because this is good for the public interest, because this is good for fairness between all, because this is good for the most vulnerable, for the poorest among us. Left and right, you have the same language. In this way, because you have to defend your policies publicly, you have a civilizing of speech, of words, of discourse. And if the other components of a well-functioning democracy are in place, that is, the opposition does its job, the media, the academia, civil society more broadly, if the other components do their job, then it's not only the discourse that will be civilized, but also the deeds, also what is being done. This is, Elster says, and other people in other language, who've been reflecting on deliberative democracy, say, well, this is at the core of a well-functioning democracy. Democracy doesn't consist in sort of aggregating people's preferences or their interests. It consists in transforming, in a way, the publicly asserted preferences so that justice and the common interest is being pursued. Now, in this slide, so it's somewhat different, related, but somewhat different concept of civilization. What does civilization consist in? Well, it consists in moving, yes, from brutality and violence to speech, first to speech, that is to negotiation, where you talk to each other in the pursuit of mutual interest. But then next, and that is where deliberative democracy comes in, but next you move from just negotiation for mutual interest, bargaining, to deliberation, to arguing in the light of some common notion of fairness. And this is what's happening when a democracy functions well. Here again, it's not difficult, because it's all very brief, elliptic, but it's not difficult to see the connection with my dual claim. First aspect, the more cross-border deliberation there already is by virtue of our common problems or the interdependencies, climate change, whatever, the more widely shared a rationale for more regional integration, in our case, for more European integration. And so the process of civilization, that is the slow movement from negotiation, bargaining towards deliberation and arguing, prompts or strengthens the argument in favor of having more regional integration. But conversely, and above all, the deeper regional integration is, in our case European integration is, the more bargaining among member states give way to arguing, to deliberation among citizens and among their representatives. This means, again, like in the Pinker connection, this means, again, a no doubt slow, laborious, but massively important gradual widening of the scale at which the civilizing process in this sense operates. These were piggybacking on the history of violence and the analysis of the underlying causes of the decline, the secular decline in violence, piggybacking also on this understanding of what goes on in well-functioning democracy. So piggybacking on these things, this is essentially my argument and what underlies my long-term optimism. Does that mean that everything is moving the right way? Of course not. Take the Brexit. If and when it happens, it will be undeniably a regression of the civilizing process in the second sense I've just described. But, you know, this is a little bit like Wikipedia, another fantastic, mind-boggling utopia. Every day, there are vandals and idiots who deteriorate the fabulous stock of knowledge freely available to everyone in the world through Wikipedia. And yet, every single day, Wikipedia expands and improves because there are enough people, both knowledgeable and benevolent enough, who don't let themselves be impressed by the vandals and far more than compensate daily this damage that is being caused by others. Well, it's the same with the European Union. There will be ups and there will be downs, and there will be lessons to be drawn from many ups and from all the downs. But these lessons to be drawn, not about the general direction of the movement we should take, but about the specific path, because the most direct path is not always the best path. It should follow, from what I said so far, that there are good reasons to believe that there will be more ups than downs. But there is one reason, which I didn't mention, and I'll finish with this. There's one reason which I didn't mention, and for which the University of Maastricht has been playing a pioneering role. You wonder what it is? Well, as I look through the room, I think there must be an estimated 25, maybe 30 different mother tongues, different native languages that are represented in this room. And yet, you are all able to understand me. Maybe not to agree with me, one thing at a time, but understanding as is a start. And if there is one powerful trend that should bias the odds in favor of the ups against the downs in the process of European integration, but also beyond, it is the democratization of competence in that sloppy mixture of Dutch and French commonly called English. Sharing a lingua franca in Europe is of the greatest importance for the civilizing process which I've just been mentioning, and I won't spell it out, my time being up. But this should not, however, prevent us from preserving, indeed from cherishing our many native languages. So let me finish with a question that will not be in English. I sometimes wonder which of the following two expressions I should ask to be written on my grave. First one is optimist tot in de kist. And the second one, utopist tot in de kist. I'll let you judge.
Thank you very much, Philippe. And now is the moment which we all have been waiting for. And may I invite Rianne to come here.
Yes.
The official handover is a formal ceremony in which I will hand over this chain of the university to Rianne Letschert, who will become the 10th Rector Magnificus of Maastricht University. I am looking to the pedal who will help me to take this off. Yes, like this. And then. Salve rectores magnifici, interrumque salve.
Honorable Minister of Education, Culture and Science, Mayor of the City of Maastricht, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear students, dear friends. This is the first time that I'm standing high up on this pulpit, or in fact, any pulpit, in this well-respected church wearing the gown of Maastricht University with the chain of office around my neck. A bit uneasy, I can assure you. Maastricht University, with its 40 years of existence, is one of the youngest universities in the Netherlands, beautifully located in the heart of Maastricht, a city with a long history and a great tradition. The origin of its name, Mosa Trajectum, refers to its role of a location where people cross borders and connect and explore other regions. This has largely contributed to the development and identity of Maastricht, and it has given the city the reputation of being internationally oriented with a broad diversity of cultures. This is not always easy, in particular in a period of time where the attraction of the importance of diversity is under pressure. And yet, diversity is the answer to many of our concerns, also for an organization such as a university. Although Maastricht University is still young, higher education in Maastricht dates back to the Illustre School Maastricht, founded already in 1682, and therefore, as Luc Soete already remarked during his inaugural speech given in 2012, Maastricht University, in tradition, counts as one of the oldest universities of the Netherlands. And I'm looking at my new colleagues on the left. This, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to Luc Soete, outgoing rector of our university. Let me start by thanking you, Luc, for your beautiful and insightful speech. It outlines in an excellent way the period you were rector, the many things you have achieved, and the issues you have encountered while being in office. You have done a lot for Maastricht University, and I know our university community is grateful for all the contributions you made in the past 4 years. Many of your colleagues will allude to these achievements and thank you in person later today. We only met a few months ago, and how I wished we had met earlier on in our lives. Your sharp mind and wise observations, your modest and kind character, and not to forget your humor are exemplary. Now, Philip, I have to disappoint you because during the application procedure, I was not tested on my humor, so bear with me there. Dear Luc, I feel humble and a bit nervous to succeed such a great man. I very much appreciated how you introduced me into some of the rituals and secrets only a rector should know of Maastricht University over the past few months. I hope you will find the time and peace of mind to focus entirely on the field of economic models and theories, your scientific area of expertise. Within the academic community, the job of rector is considered merely as an interruption of one's scientific activities. And fully in line with this fine tradition, you will stay at our university and return to your academic work. This, in fact, is not a real return, since you managed to continue your academic work while being a rector. Again, a true example. I wish you many fruitful and productive years to come and look forward to continuing our cooperation. And here I am, the smiley power lady, as the Volkskrant headlined when they wrote a profile on me a few months ago. Or better, the lady from Tilburg University, breaking many of your traditions when it comes to appointing a rector magnificus, and in the eyes of some, even breaking the law. Why did they appoint her to become a rector of our university? Was a thought that must have crossed the minds of many of you. We will see. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to say a few introductory words about myself so that you know who I am and where I come from. I studied law at Tilburg University, the University of Amsterdam, and the University of Montpellier. I received my PhD in 2005 on a study on the impact of minority rights mechanisms, and since 2005 I worked in the field of victimology and international law at Intervict, the International Victimology Institute at Tilburg University. Victimology is a field that is interdisciplinary almost by definition. At first it mainly focused on victims of conventional crimes such as murder, theft or rape, but at Intervict we opened up a new angle of research by concentrating on persons who are victims of serious human rights violations or international crimes such as genocide or war crimes. The VIDI project that I and my colleagues were granted last year focuses on how to redress harm of victims of such horrific crimes, or to put in legal terms, how to implement the right to reparations. Neither the impact of the right to reparations on the experience of victims of such crimes, nor the mechanisms by which this impact is supposed to be reached have been subject to much scrutiny. Assessing both the value as well as the limits of the law and legal institutions in situations where the rule of law is violated in all its fundamentals is what drives me as a researcher. It brought me to countries such as Lebanon, Rwanda, Pakistan, India, South Africa, and greatly influenced my view on the law and its institutions, and taught me important life lessons. Another professional development that I would like to share with you is my membership of the Young Academy of the Dutch Royal Society of Arts and Sciences. In 2013, I was appointed as a member, and as of April 2015, I was allowed to chair this fine group of outstanding young and ambitious talents. This, ladies and gentlemen, has been a groundbreaking experience for me. The members of the Young Academy constitute a unique community of young scientists from all scientific disciplines that is critical and cooperative at the same time. And I'm very proud that Maastricht University contributes to the Academy with some of their best people. Without exception, members of the Young Academy focus on broad issues: the academic system, the relationship between science and society, our responsibilities in this respect, and the ways forward we should explore. During all these discussions, I experienced an attitude within the Young Academy that was geared towards deeper understanding and synthesis, and without exception, members contribute to the discussion in an altruistic and outgoing manner, never defending their personal agenda, never limited by the straitjacket of their scientific discipline, or their home university, or their faculty. The diversity of insights that they bring to the table is enormous, and this further convinced me that diversity can make science and the university as a whole strong, innovative, and resilient. Now you probably think, why do you want to become a rector? When you were doing this research, you were chairing this wonderful group. During the past months, when I was a visiting guest here for a few days a week, having introductory meetings already with some of my colleagues here, one of the two of the most frequently asked questions were, why do you want to become a rector, and what about your research and education? Now, during these encounters, some referred to the position of rector as a vague and insignificant job. And one of our colleagues, who is also here, welcomed me with the remark that he was happy to see me as his new rector, but at the same time he said that he hadn't the faintest idea what a rector does for a living. I answered, neither do I, but I will find out. On a serious note, although I have great passion for academic research and teaching, and I will strive to remain involved in both, as Luc did, I realized at a certain moment, eating oysters in Bretagne, that key drivers for me are not how to improve my age index or how to obtain more personal grants. The reason why I want to get up in the morning is to engage with academic life and get involved in all its aspects, to make a valuable contribution to academic growth, and to try to make a difference for students, staff, and society at large. I see the university as a laboratory where we are allowed to think about the future, where we have a great responsibility to invest in our students, to assist them in becoming responsible citizens and leaders in their field, and where the knowledge we create through our research may shape our future and address the challenges we are faced with. Another reason for driving to Maastricht early in the morning is that I have great concerns that next generations of young scholars who come after me face many more difficulties to enter and make an academic career. I am eager to see where we, as universities, can change the current atmosphere, which is getting increasingly negative and at times even cynical. This not only relates to staff becoming more pressurized, but also to students who become more and more outspoken and demand high-quality education, and rightly so. I want to create a connectivity with the student population and together continuously work to increase the quality of our education, thereby also calling upon their responsibilities as students, because in my view, rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. Access to higher education is not a mandatory act, but a gift and a privilege. And I want to especially address our students. I hope you are aware of your unique position, being able to receive the best possible education, having the opportunity to build your character, develop your personality, and prepare for a position to contribute to society. And you can do this at one of the finest universities in the country, enjoying academic life as much as possible. Dear audience, you may expect from me the presentation of a concrete 10-step or 12-step, like Luc did, strategic plan, but I won't. Some of you might be disappointed now. After all, wasn't it Maastricht University's independent, famous newspaper, The Observant, unknown to me before I came to Maastricht, but since my appointment has found a fixed spot next to my bed? Wasn't it that newspaper that headlined in the first interview with me that with the new rector, exciting things will happen? In my view, Maastricht University has embarked many years ago on a path where exciting things are happening. I think of Brightlands, I think of AdLab, and the many interfaculty and interdisciplinary research institutes where groundbreaking research is taking place. But if you want something exciting from me, allow me to share with you my vision on diversity and dialogical leadership, so that you get to know me a little bit more. Diversity for me has a multi-level meaning, and let me explain what I mean with this. When talking about diversity, it is often related or limited to diversity within groups, with scientific studies showing that a mixed group of persons from different gender, ethnicity, age and culture has positive effects on the organization's functioning. I believe this is certainly true, and there is still a lot of effort needed to achieve this, which I consider as the first level of diversity. A second level of diversity relates to the scientific disciplines that we study. We need to think how we can ensure that a diversity of disciplines, and within these disciplines, research teams can flourish. And indeed, we cannot do everything, but I consider this as a responsibility of all universities gathered here today to see where we can work together to make sure that Dutch science across disciplines arrives where it belongs, at the top. A third level relates to what we expect from our colleagues. I see too often that we want staff members to be the sheep with 5 feet, as we say in Dutch. We need to excel in research, in teaching, in valorization, and for some, management and fundraising. How realistic is this? Although a university needs staff members that are good at all these issues, we cannot expect us to excel in all. I therefore plea for diversity also in the way we evaluate our work, where we acknowledge and stimulate various individual contributions that impact the work of the entire team. Key is considering research, education and generating knowledge impact as teamwork, where together with each of our individual contributions as dedicated and motivated academics, teachers and members of our valued support staff, we can make a difference for society. These objectives are not easy to achieve, but they are by no means infeasible. I'm a strong believer of dialogical leadership as a driver of diversity at all these levels. Dialogical leadership applies inclusiveness and transparency in decision-making as key differentiating features. This means that we need to listen first before we act. And this fits well with another advice I got during my first meetings here in Maastricht, namely to descend from the berg. The berg, you will find out later what that is. And engage in a dialogue with people from all different levels and organizations within the university. I will follow this advice and I will join my colleagues, Martin Paul and Nick Bos, to make this a regular activity. If you cannot go to the berg will come to you. I will strive for open-minded and, if necessary, tough discussions with constructive conclusions that stimulate transparent and clear decision-making. I also wish you to take up responsibility for your own success in life, and I consider it my responsibility to invest in that personally. I want you to be open for discussion and show and ask respect and admiration for each other, both in person and in profession. The ambition to encourage strength and resilience are not just buzzwords in strategic plans or words of a just appointed administrator. I believe when truly investing in our staff and students, we will all grow, institutionally and individually. In my weekly visits over the past 3 months, I've noticed a few remarkable things about Maastricht University that already reflect these ambitions. Unquestionably, the university holds a beautiful location in the city of Maastricht, where the many old buildings contrast the youthful spirits of its inhabitants. The warmth of the staff of the university I noticed as another asset of this university. And another thing I enjoyed very much are our students. They are vital and engaged and very active in the multifold of study and student activities. The slogan they chose for this year's welcoming week for the first year students, "The future is now," I found magnificent. Having said that, I also see that universities are frequently in the focal point of attention because things are allegedly not going well. Governors and authorities are focusing too much of their attention on rankings and performance indicators. Employees complain about stress at work and feel frustrated by the enormous pressure they feel imposed on them by the university system. Students call for more participation and democracy and want to be actively involved in the process of managing a university. Media feast on fraud cases and amplify any kind of academic abuse they notice. Society in general wants to know what universities can contribute on their account and call upon us for knowledge utilization. It is my true conviction that universities can handle their problems by taking more ownership, not merely looking to The Hague or Brussels for guidance or instructions. By working on an attractive diversity profile that provides us with ample opportunities for both collective and individual developments, we can give universities a sound basis for the coming years to grow without the need to adhere to strict performance targets or to get trapped by work pressure. The question that remains is, what should be that profile and how are we going to take ownership of it? For me, this boils down to the following fundamental, almost existential question. Why and for what purpose are we running this university? This question calls for an open discussion on the scientific disciplines that we choose to study and to the way we want to educate our younger generations. Secondly, it relates to the discussion about the need and obligation to generate impact with our knowledge. Also here for me, diversity is the guiding principle, which means that, to give just 2 examples, we should value the work of scholars who wish to devote their time to purely curiosity-driven research topics with its often long-awaited output, whereas we should appreciate the longing of others to invest more time or to excel in what is often called applied research. Likewise, knowledge impact is not only about transferring knowledge into economic value, it also concerns non-monetary values, and these should be appreciated accordingly. For now, I have said quite enough. Dear Martin, dear Nick, I'm looking forward to serve with you on the Board of Governance, and I wish to thank the members of the Supervisory Board, the management team of the university, and the University Council for the faith entrusted upon me. Dear colleagues at the Berg, thanks in particular also for making my first months here such a pleasant experience. I want to conclude by saying that I'm terribly excited to start this new job as a rector. With its strong international orientation, its well-chosen educational vision, its compelling research profile, and its wonderful staff and students, Maastricht University has stolen my heart and mind as of the first moment when I arrived in March. I'm honored to become part of your community. Let us all try to be strong, innovative, and resilient, and not to forget optimistic. We already heard it, as life is too short to complain, or to repeat the slogan of our students, the future is now. Ik heb gezegd. Thank you so much for this wonderful music. It's the passion on your faces is actually what I meant with Team Science. You know, if you see them looking at each other, thank you so much. And they played for you something that I should know to say because it's Brabants. Waar vind gij? Or Flemish. And Guising. Thank you so much. We are very pleased and honored to announce that the Minister of Education, Culture and Science, Mrs. Bussemaker, will now take the floor and address us. Thank you so much for being here.
Dear Luc, dear Rianne, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here. Normally I am unable to attend every inauguration, but today I'm more than happy to make an exception. This is a good day for diversity, for academia, and for this university in particular. Luc Soete's departure is, of course, no reason for celebration, but we can celebrate your accomplishments. I've come to know you as intelligent, outspoken, and always forward-looking. And in your quest for excellence, you have never been afraid of going against the grain of conventional wisdom. Recently, you proposed outsourcing the grading of exams and papers to India. Doing so was supposed to help reduce pressure on lecturers who were already overburdened. Some universities in the United States are already doing it, apparently with success. Those who were not too keen on your idea probably thought that you were taking your focus on internationalization a bit too far. However, in all seriousness, Maastricht is celebrating its 14th anniversary as the most international university of the Netherlands. For you, Luc, being a European citizen is an important ambition, but it's not an end unto itself. Science is inherently an international endeavor. Science should enrich society, regardless of national borders. And the best way to do so is by creating a melting pot of cultures and worldviews. This has been your quest as the Belgian rector of a Dutch university, and we will miss you. Luckily, we still have a strong Belgian presence in Dutch academia. Luc, thank you very much for everything you did, and I wish you all the best for the future, even if that future is not what it used to be, as you often say. Thank you very much. I'm convinced, however, that the future is looking bright for Maastricht University and, of course, for Rianne Letschert. I heard that the news of your nomination caused some disappointment in Tilburg. A columnist for the university magazine there even swore out loud when he heard you were leaving. It just shows how proud they were to have you as their colleague. I'm sure Maastricht will soon share that pride. You are an ambitious and visionary academic. Your work has always had a clear international focus, as you just told us. This makes you uniquely qualified to succeed Luc Soete. Your inauguration today is a true milestone for diversity in academia. And of today, 4 Dutch universities have women at the helm, whether as a rector or as president of the executive board. This is clearly an important step in the right direction, but it's not nearly enough, because only 18% of Dutch professors are women. And compared to the rest of Europe, we are just an average performer. In other words, we are not living up to our own expectations. We have to do much better than that. So, although Rianne's inauguration is cause for celebration, it's also a wake-up call. We can and must do more. The talent is there. And the argument that talent is only available abroad is baseless. Rianne is living proof of this fact. Still, we have a number of barriers to overcome. Strengthening diversity in academia requires something of all of us. It requires vision, leadership, and creativity. Firstly, it's a question of vision. It's now 2016, after all. If we are truly convinced that the class ceiling should be a relic of the past, then we must make sure that it is. We can only do so by showing leadership, by changing the current mindset step by step. And this means that all of us will confront some implicit biases along the way. Just think about the prejudice we sometimes have against women, men, migrants, and other minorities without even realizing it. But if we have the courage and freedom to look one another right in the eyes, then we are showing our true strength. We are showing our resilience, a concept Rianne also used a couple of times in her speech. We are showing our capacity to learn and grow, and this is what academia must always stand for. Leadership means doing things in a little differently from time to time, just like Maastricht did in nominating Rianne. Internal rules stipulate that a new rector must be nominated from among the university's own professors. This meant that officially Rianne could not be a candidate. Luckily, vision and leadership prevailed. And because of that, Maastricht will be better off. You are a true role model for other Dutch universities. So let us take a moment today to make a pledge. Next year, we will celebrate the fact that exactly 100 years ago, Johanna Westerdijk was appointed as the first female professor in the Netherlands. This anniversary is the perfect opportunity for us to go one step further in our journey of progress. Today, out of the more than 2,000 full-time university professor positions, not even 500 are filled by women. Recently, a group of women academics called Athena's Angels made a daring proposal. They are daring universities to commit themselves to bringing at least 100 more women on board in professorship positions in the next 5 years, to celebrate the anniversary of the appointment of Johanna Westerdijk. And this would increase the number of female professors by more than 20%. And it may sound like a bold proposal, but I'm convinced it can be done, especially if universities work together to make it happen. So I'm supporting it, and I hope you will all respond. In addition to action taken by universities, I also urge women to be more proactive in showcasing their talents too. We need you to be a little less humble and a little bit more bold. And those of us in supporting roles can certainly be a little bit more daring too. As Rianne has often said, she did not think of applying for this position herself. When Maastricht first called her to see if she was interested, she was very nearly dumbstruck. Luckily, her amazement quickly turned into curiosity. And the rest, as they say, is history. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Rianne, a young and ambitious university with a young and ambitious rector. It sounds like a recipe for success. I wish you all the best, you both, you and the university. You have a bright future ahead of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, it's working. Thank you so much for these very kind words. And we hope that you will come more often to Maastricht. That would be very nice. I would like to give the floor now to the mayor of the city of Maastricht, Mrs. Annemarie Pentenstrake. Please, the floor is yours.
As I'm supposed to be a surprise, I work with this now. So, Your Excellency, Minister Bussemaker, members of the board of Maastricht University, ladies and gentlemen. Success isn't possible in a failing environment. I learned these wise words of wisdom not from economic philosopher Luc Soete, as you perhaps expected. This short, powerful statement comes from Fijke Sijbesma, chairman of the managing board of DSM. But if there's anyone who has demonstrated the truth of these words time and again, who has made it the very essence of his policy, not to mention his creed, then it is Professor Luc Soete. As Rector Magnificus, and before then as professor and director of UNU Merit, he has been a tireless advocate of the new alliance between the university on the one hand and the city and the region on the other. To quote his own words, the university must own up its responsibility in the environment in which it operates. And because obligations in an alliance are mutual, I would like to add the city and the region must create a living and working environment in which a top university like ours can flourish. The internationally renowned economist Luc Soete is masterful in persuading others that the university plays an exceptionally important role in the local and regional labor market. In the economic crisis of recent years, Maastricht University did much to boost this region's resistance to the downturn. It did this by making a major contribution to innovation and the knowledge economy. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout his career, Luc Soete was the professor who reached out. By that I mean he reached out beyond the academic world. His weekly columns, which ran for many years in the local daily De Limburger, are a fine example of that. He took his readers with him to the world of the university. He explained the economic challenges facing this region, showed what actually went on within the walls of the university, and above, he explained how important the university is to the regional community. And this city, the oldest in the Netherlands, has had to get used to its university, of course, the youngest in the country. That has taken time, and above all, an open dialogue. Luc Soete was the champion that we needed. He is open-minded and a skilled communicator, and he also is a very likable person. The university and the city are on much better terms now. Our relationship is not ideal yet. There are still improvements that we can make, but we are on the same track and we have come a long way. We can thank Luc Soete for helping us to get this far. And I would like now to say a few words to him personally. Professor Soete, dear Luc, Thanks to your efforts, Maastricht University has a fine reputation in the international academic world. And that reputation has been confirmed on multiple occasions in authoritative world rankings. And I can assure you that the municipal government is extremely proud of the university's standing. And more than that, everyone realizes that that standing is crucial to the city's prosperity. In fact, as I always say, our university is our lifeline. Since you arrived in Maastricht, 1986, you have done so much to support and improve the academic climate in the city, in addition to all your other national and international achievements. The previous speakers have noted these points, and there's no need for me to talk about this, to repeat their words. What I do wish to emphasize, however, is that the city of Maastricht is hugely indebted to you. Thank you so much for the eminent role you have played in our university's development, a university that has boosted Maastricht International's reputation and its vitality. Thank you also for your involvement in the countless initiatives in the fields of education, culture and sport. There are too many to mention them all here. And I would like to express our gratitude not only in words, but also in a gesture. I therefore have the pleasure of announcing that the Maastricht municipal government has decided to award the Order of Merit of the City of Maastricht to you, Professor Luc Louis Gilbert Soete. Congratulations on receiving this award. It is an honor that is bestowed only in the most exceptional cases. I would also like to congratulate your wife and family members. And I will now present you the award. Thank you so much.
Is asking me to, if I want to say something, but I know that time is short in these events, and I've always been cutting other people having the last word. But now that she gives me this opportunity, dear Mrs. Mayor, I'm delighted to receive this. I mean, I've came here in '86. I'd been once here as a kid before in a school trip to Maastricht back in the '60s. And it was love at first sight. And my family, who knows, who's sitting there, they know that we went to Maastricht and we're here for 30 years and are extremely happy here, even though our kids have moved up to other places. Well, Dominic is not here, so they've moved up north, etc., stuck in trains and other things as usual. But we here in Maastricht are at home. Thank you so much for this.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of this academic ceremony on the occasion of the handing over of the rectorship of Maastricht University. Thank you so much for coming here, and please do come again. You are all cordially invited to join us at the Minderbroedersberg, that is the famous mountain. You will see why it is called a mountain. And there will be the reception with fresh drinks, which you probably need by now. I now declare this academic session closed, and may I ask you to first allow the cortege to leave the church. Thank you very much.